At 7:14 p.m. on Thanksgiving night, the carving knife flashed under our kitchen lights like a thin smile. Charles loved theatrics. He lifted the knife above the bronze turkey as if knighting it, while the cranberry sauce bled onto my white linen runner. Asheville's cold pressed its forehead against the windows, and the smell of sage and butter made the house feel expensive, safe, staged. Perfection, Charles said, dimples showing. He winked at our small table. Just us this year. To us, Evie. To a clean slate. He poured Pinot into my glass, more into his. The bottle clinked the rim. It was the clink of performance. You won't have to worry about anything anymore, he added, like a promise sealed with steam. That was his talent, dressing a lie like Sunday best. Subscribe to our channel. This helps our work reach more people. I adjusted the gold napkin ring I'd bought at an estate sale in 2009 for $12 and set it straight. At 62, I didn't shout. I aligned. What worry? I asked, keeping my voice low enough to honor the gravy. He chuckled. You know, little debts, loose ends. His eyes slid toward the hall where my leather tote rested on the bench, my tote with the file folder tucked inside, a habit I'd kept since teaching. Copy of my mother's will, property insurance, the deed from 2002 with her maiden name inked on the transfer. I keep receipts. The doorbell rang at 7:21, a second ring, clipped like a metronome. Charles's knife hovered in midair. A pearl of juice gathered on the blade's tip. Expecting someone? I asked. He wiped the blade on the dish towel, casual as a stagehand. Probably a neighbor. Leftover exchange. He set the knife down with the fat end toward me, the point toward the door, as if the kitchen itself were accusing. When I opened it, two figures stood on the doormat, crisp as folded paper. A woman in a dark peacoat showed a badge first, smile second. Evening. Special Agent Ruiz, this is Agent Klein, Mrs. Evelyn Carter? I felt Charles arrive behind me by the cologne he wore on victories, cedar and denial. Can we help you? He asked, shoulders forward, real estate charm unfurled. Agent Ruiz kept her voice polite, unsweet. We're looking into a property transfer dated October 29th. Mountain Ridge Road, parcel ending in 184. We have a few questions about a sale for $60,000 cash. The number burned the air like whiskey. My mother's cabin, the place where I learned that quiet is its own language, had a parcel ending in 184. I tasted metal. Charles's hand found my shoulder, squeezed. To the agents, he said, I'm sure this is a misunderstanding. To me, under his breath, don't invite trouble into our home, Evie. Agent Klein held up a paper sleeve. We also have a warrant to collect any relevant documents related to the transfer and associated accounts. My breath slowed, disciplined. Inside the kitchen, steam climbed from the turkey like a prayer that didn't know who to address. I stepped aside. Of course, I said, and my voice surprised me. It was smooth, like a hallway polished by years. They entered. Charles tried to laugh. This is ridiculous. A cabin? She never... Agent Ruiz slid the warrant toward me for acknowledgement. In the black block letters, my full name stared back. Evelyn May Carter. Under it, the line items, deed copy, notarized signature, offshore transfers. If stories like this help you breathe, tap like and subscribe. Why was my name on that federal warrant? By morning, the house smelled like cooled gravy and something scorched, pride probably. We'd slept apart. Charles in the guest room, me on the couch with a wool throw and the soft electric hum of a clock that had kept our hours for 20 years. 8:03 a.m., Friday. The turkey carcass hunched in the roasting pan, like proof that feasts always leave bones. My phone vibrated across the coffee table. Henderson County Realty. The display said, unknown, but I knew that name. My thumb hovered, then tapped. Mrs. Carter? A man's voice, bright with closing day optimism. Ryan with Henderson County Realty. Quick confirmation on yesterday's finalizing. Mountain Ridge Road. Ah, the luxury cabin? Buyer wired $60,000 as agreed. Just need to confirm delivery of keys so we can log completion. I stood, the blanket falling off my shoulders like a curtain. Excuse me? Keys, he repeated, cheerful. We're scheduled to meet at the cabin entrance, 3 p.m. today, November 29th. If you prefer, we can courier them. Mr. Carter said. Mr. Carter says many things, I said. Send me the paperwork you have. Of course, I'll forward the deed copy and the bill of sale we received from your notary. Pretty quick turnaround, actually. Efficient. Which notary? My voice sharpened enough to cut string. A pause, paper rustling. Notary, Lydia Bowers. Stamp number ending 6712, signed October 29th, 4:42 p.m. Lydia Bowers. I'd taught her boy Marcus remedial reading in 2005. He'd loved Toni Morrison before he knew how to pronounce all the words. I closed my eyes. Thank you, Ryan. Forward everything to Evelyn.carteroashleen.dedu. On it. And congratulations on the sale, he added, too chirpy for a funeral. I hung up and stared at the hall bench. My leather tote sat where I'd left it, innocent as a stray dog. I pulled the file, manila, edges softened by years, and spread its contents on the dining table. The original 2002 deed with my mother's name, Eleanor James, the insurance policy renewed in March 2023, and the property tax receipt stamped paid, $2,184 for the year. I aligned corners. I breathed. Coffee? Charles asked from the doorway, hair neatly combed, tie on, as if courtship could be ironed back into the morning. We had quite a shock last night. The FBI. Overkill. Over what? I asked without looking up. Something to do with our neighbor's lot. These agencies mix up parcels, government work, you know. He smiled in the direction of my papers, then slid his gaze away, too fast. Let's not ruin the holidays, Evie. I held up the 2002 deed between two fingers. Where were you on October 29th at 4:42 p.m.? He blinked. Why? My phone chimed. Email from Ryan, deed and bill of sale. I opened the PDF. There it was, my name, inked in a sloppy cousin of my hand, and Lydia's stamp, 67-2, pressed like a bruise. The signature tried to mimic my clean loop on the E, but it stumbled. A stranger wearing my face. Charles stepped closer. You don't know how contracts work, he said softly. Let me handle this. At my age, I don't shout. I document. I transferred the PDFs to a folder named Cabin, Evidence, 24 deck, and backed them up on a flash drive with a blue tag. If I didn't sell it, who signed my name? I first saw the cabin under a soft white silence that 2002 December, the kind that lays a hand on your shoulder and says, Hush now, this is yours. Mountain Ridge Road was a ribbon of ice. My tires whispered against it as I crawled past mile marker 18. My mother had died that October, October 16th, 2002, 3:17 a.m. The machines asking the room to believe in breath. The insurance check came in November, $92,000 after fees, and I used $78,500 to buy a square of quiet with a green tin roof. Never sell peace for love, Mama had told me at the kitchen sink in '97, rinsing collard greens. And if a man asks you to, don't argue. Write the date. I wrote dates. I wrote amounts. On December 6th, 2002, I signed the deed at the Henderson County Recorder's Office, window B3. The clerk had a candy cane pin and a red scarf. I remember because joy is easy to forget. It needs a hook. I took a Polaroid of the fireplace the first night, log awkward, flame stubborn. On the back, I wrote, First fire, deck 7, 2002, 6:22 p.m. The cabin was modest then, a 2-bedroom with cedar walls and a porch that leaned like an old auntie. I stood barefoot on pine floors and promised out loud, No one will turn you into cash. When you grow up making lists to survive, rent due 5th, power 12th, gas 23rd, ownership feels like a person who finally believes you. I met Charles the next spring at a church fundraiser, May 2003. He wore a navy blazer that said he respected rules he could bend. Real estate, he introduced himself, as if it were a temperament. He visited the cabin once in October 2004 and said, Cute, a little far. Think of the equity. I learned to change the subject. Some men call it harmony when you abandon the thing you love quietly. Back in my dining room now, November 29th, I laid the old Polaroid beside Ryan's email on my iPad. Flame, date, stamp, forged signature, stamp number 6712. Lydia's son, Marcus, had written me a thank you note in June 2005. You made reading look like stairs I could climb. I kept it in the same manila folder. I touched the paper's edge. Climb this, I murmured, and opened my laptop. I typed Henderson County Records, notary verification, and pulled Lydia's commission details. Commission valid 2021-2025, office on Maple Street, phone 828-555-6712. The last four matched the stamp, a tidy circle snapping shut. I saved a screenshot, notary, Lydia, ref 6712, PNG, and added it to cabin, evidence, 24 Deke. Charles drifted past the doorway, tie loosened. You're living in the past, Evie, he sighed, eyes on the Polaroid. People change. Documents don't, I said. The landline rang at 10:14 a.m., a sound from another decade. I let it go to voicemail. Charles checked his watch, then his phone. I have an appointment, he said, kissing the air near my temple. We'll talk tonight, okay? When the door closed, the house settled. I looked out at the bare oak in our yard and pictured the hemlocks around the cabin, regal and unbothered. My mother's handwriting on the 2002 insurance letter curved across the page with the patience of someone who'd waited for better days and deserved them. I slid the Polaroid back into its sleeve and straightened the stack until the edges met. Grief is a file you never finish organizing. Love too. But theft? Theft loves sloppiness. I opened a new document titled Timeline, Key Events, and wrote the first line, Oct 29, 4:42 p.m. Forged deed notarized. So why was the deed dated last month? By noon, the light turned sharp and honest, the kind that points to dust you missed. I brewed coffee in the French press I'd bought on sale for $29.99 in 2011, set the timer for 4 minutes, and cleaned the kitchen while the grounds bled flavor. Order keeps panic from choosing your words. On the counter, under the ceramic fruit bowl, lay an envelope I didn't recognize. Off-white, cheap, a faint coffee ring on the corner. No return address. Someone had torn it open with a thumb, not a letter opener. The flap curled like a guilty lip. Inside, a photocopy of the deed, my name, the cabin's parcel, 184, the notary stamp 6712, and a sticky note in block letters, Hold this till dinner, C. Charles's handwriting always wore cologne, thick, performative. I slid the copy free and angled it to the window. The forged E in Evelyn stumbled where mine glides. The Y didn't dip low enough. Vanity can't fake muscle memory. In the margins, near the notary seal, a faint shadow suggested another stamp beneath, like someone had pressed twice, corrected, pretended it was tidy. I scanned the page with my phone, scan, deed, copy one PDF, and zoomed. There it was, a timestamp smudged but legible, 16:42:19. Ryan had said 4:42 p.m., clean as surgery, footsteps on the porch. I slid the envelope back where it had been and turned as the door opened. Maya swept in with a florist's smile and a paper bag from La Boulangerie. Brought croissants, she sang, kissing the air near my cheek. 30 years old, accountant clever, lipstick the color of new cherries. Dad texted me, said you two needed a treat. We need a lot of things, I said, voice even. She placed the bag by the coffee. So, congrats on the sale. 60,000. Neat number. Her eyes flicked to the fruit bowl, back to me. Too fast. I let the silence sit between us like a third chair. Who told you that number? I kept my hands folded. Old teacher stance. She laughed lightly. Dad mentioned it last week. Dinner table math. We were brainstorming, reinvesting. Asheville market's wild. Your cabin's cute, but underperforming. My cabin, I repeated. Underperforming. The French press hissed its quiet approval. She spun a napkin. He's just trying to fix things. The tax stuff, the Cayman situation. She caught herself, bit her lip. I mean paperwork, not Cayman? I didn't blink. Maya's eyes widened a performative millimeter. Oh, Mom, Evelyn, sorry, slip of the tongue. You know, Dad, he exaggerates. Anyway, the main thing is, 60,000 in hand is better than a headache. I poured coffee, handed her a cup, and watched her wrap both palms around it like we were in the same winter. "You're sure it was 60? I asked. Her smile slipped, then steadied. "That's what he said," she said, too quick, and took a sip. I set my cup down on a coaster I'd crocheted in 2010. "Maya, when did you last see Lydia Bowers?" "Who?" "The notary who stamped the deed." She blinked. "Oh, I don't keep track of notaries." "Strange," I said, and let the word find its seat. She stood, adjusting her coat. "Dad's planning an apology dinner tonight. 7. Peace offering. He wants to explain everything. You'll love it." She looked at the envelope again without meaning to. "I'll see you then." When the door closed, I lifted the fruit bowl and palmed the envelope. "Hold this till dinner." See. He wanted to control the reveal, manage the performance, script my face. That's the thing about men who invest in narratives. They never consider a woman who invests in evidence. I slipped the envelope into my leather tote behind the original deed and the Polaroid and added a fresh, sticky note of my own. "Bring to 7 p.m. dinner. Record. Old habit." I checked my phone. Voice memo app ready. Storage at 28.4 GB free. But the notary's name, I'd taught her son. The house held the warmth of coffee and the shape Maya's perfume left behind. Sweet, calculating. At 12:47 p.m., my email pinged with a message titled, "Ratification of Sale. Kindly sign," from a service I knew too well, DocuSign. I clicked. There it was. Ratification and quitclaim, pre-filled with my name, my cabin's parcel, 184, the buyer listed as Jonathan Reese, closing agent initials JR on every page like a child writing on a wall. Charles's signature was neat, practiced. Mine was a forgery trying to look relaxed. A yellow arrow blinked, "Sign here," in the bottom right. When you've taught for 32 years, you recognize the difference between a shaky hand and a lying one. My phone buzzed. "Agent Ruiz." "Mrs. Carter," she said. "I appreciate your calm last night." "I keep receipts," I said. "I figured," she replied. "2 things. 1, do not sign any ratification of that sale. 2, if funds moved under your name, Treasury may attempt a freeze by December 24th, 8 p.m. We prefer to avoid seizing anything you need." "How do we avoid it?" "Documentation," she said. "Clean, dated. If you can get us the original deed and proof of your mother's inheritance purchase, that helps. And, watch the family dynamic, these cases are rarely solo." I looked at the DocuSign screen, the arrow begging for consent. "What happens if I do nothing?" "You keep your leverage," Ruiz said. "We'll meet Monday at 10 a.m. at our downtown office. Bring copies." After we hung up, I printed the ratification as evidence, ratify, DocuSign.pdf instead of signing. I highlighted Jonathan Reese and the date, November 28th, 9:06 p.m., Thanksgiving night. A sale that doesn't respect the day you say grace will not respect the rest of your life. The landline rang again. "Pastor Irene." "Evelyn, dear," she began, gentler than a quilt. "I'm hearing chatter. The board thinks, given legal matters, perhaps you should skip coordinating the December 22nd charity dinner, just until this clears." "Understood," I said, folding the disappointment into fourths and tucking it away. Reputation, like crystal, breaks in silence first. At 2:15, a text from Charles. "Dinner. 7 p.m. Wear something blue. Let's make peace." At 2:17, a text from Maya. "If you sign ratification, Dad can fix the Cayman thing. We're all on the same team." Team. In my experience, the word team appears the moment someone wants your signature more than your voice. I opened my tote and slid the envelope deeper behind the 2002 deed and insurance letter. I added a fresh page to my timeline. Nov 29, 12:47, ratification email received. Sender, Henderson title. Buyer, J. Reese. Nov 29, 1:06. Agent Ruiz call, do not sign. Freeze risk by deck 24, 8 p.m. Nov 29, 2:17. Maya text Cayman. At 3:03, Ryan from the realty office called again, chipper grinding against my patience. "Keys at 3 won't work then?" Buyer's persistent. "Tell Mr. Reese to be persistent in court," I said, and ended the call. I showered. I chose a blue dress I'd worn to my retirement ceremony in 2018, silk that falls like a satisfied exhale. At my age, I don't perform. I prepare. In the mirror, I smoothed my hair back and practiced the face I wear when a student lies out of fear. Patient, unblinking. I placed the blue tag flash drive in my purse, opened my voice memo app, labeled a new file apology dinner, 7 p.m., rec, and checked the battery, 92%. If you step into that church tomorrow, Charles had written once when we fought over tithes and taxes, then erased the text before sending. I'd watched the 3 dots and understood the shape of his threat by the silence it left. He wants peace on his terms. I want truth on paper. If you step into that restaurant at 7, I whispered to my reflection, I'll bring the past with me. If you step into that dinner tonight, The restaurant sat on Lexington Avenue, the kind that believes in candles and reclaimed wood. 6:58 p.m. I arrived early, asked for the corner table, and placed my purse on the bench beside me. Open, voice memo rolling, rec 00000. I ordered water, watched the door. Charles walked in at 7:06, carrying a bouquet too large for the room. White lilies, apology masquerading as purity. He kissed my cheek. The air shivered with charm, and he set a small wrapped box on the table. Blue, he said, tapping my dress, pleased with himself. You look like forgiveness. I smiled without my teeth. You look like a closing argument. He laughed, signaling the waiter. 2 Merlots, he said, slipping into a rhythm he'd rehearsed. To new beginnings, and to us keeping things simple. His eyes slid to my purse, then back. We ordered trout almondine for me, ribeye for him, sides we'd always shared. Haricots verts mashed with garlic, a little theater of normalcy. He unfolded his napkin with the devotion some men reserve for truth. Evie, I hate what happened last night, he began. Government overreach. They love to make a fuss. About, I asked. A misunderstanding of parcels, and an opportunity I seized to clean our ledgers. He touched the gift box. Open it. Inside, a bracelet. Silver, thin, elegant. The clasp felt like a secret. Pretty, I said, and set it beside the bread. Gifts are bridges men build when their footprints are still wet. He leaned in. You've always wanted out from under those taxes on the cabin. I solved that. $60,000 is exactly what the market would bear. It's pragmatic. I did it for us. Pragmatic, I repeated, like a foreign word. He reached for my hand. And there were pressures, small ones. Cayman? He stopped, blinked, reset his mouth. Which I've handled. The point is, this ratification they emailed, just sign it. We'll be square before Christmas. You love Christmas. I love proof, I said. He chuckled, cutting his steak with the confidence of a man who thinks knives only cut one way. You don't have to understand contracts to benefit from them. I sipped water, arranged my face into the expression women use to coax truth from men who worship their own intelligence. Explain it like I'm slow then. He relaxed, happy to teach. We transfer the deed, which, technically, already happened, and then you ratify. That protects you. And there's a buyer, Jonathan. Good kid. Connected to people who can expedite things. Connected how? He speared a piece of steak, chewed thoughtfully. You watch too much television. The FBI, overblown. We're small fish. They'll be busy with bigger sharks by Christmas Eve. Besides, I paid off a debt. The number you heard, 60, that's just the surface. There were side agreements, which you don't need to be troubled by. Side agreements, I said, as the waiter set down our plates. He lifted his glass. The lilies watched us like witnesses. Evie, he said, voice soft, solemn as a vow. Let's stop fighting. To a future without headaches. I glanced at the purse, the voice memo humming. Around us, other couples murmured about specials and vacations. The bracelet lay where I'd left it, silver catching candlelight like a warning. Charles raised his glass higher, smile bright enough to sell a house without windows. To freedom from debt, he said, eyes on mine, waiting for me to drink. At 11:56 p.m. The house was a stage after the audience leaves. Chairs pushed back, candle stubs surrendering, a single glass ring on the table shaped like a 0. The apology dinner had ended in polite choreography. We came home in separate cars. Charles disappeared into his office, door closed, a blue glow leaking beneath like a secret. I changed into my wool robe and set the bracelet he'd gifted me on the dresser. It looked like a promise that didn't know how to keep itself. I took my blue tag flash drive from my purse and copied every file again. Cabin, evidence, 24 deck, ratify, DocuSign, notary, Lydia, REF 6712 PNG, and printed the timeline I'd started. At my age, I don't shout. I number. The doorbell rang at 12:02 a.m., a polite, measured 3 taps after. I stood in the hallway, the old clock marking the second hand like a metronome for courage. When I opened the door, Agent Ruiz stood there with Agent Klein and a third person in a Treasury windbreaker whose face said they did not enjoy surprises. "Mrs. Carter," Ruiz said, soft enough to belong in my foyer. "We're executing a narrower warrant. We'll be brief." Charles was suddenly beside me, shirt untucked, smile buttoned. "Midnight? Surely there's a window of opportunity," the Treasury agent cut in. "Funds are moving." He held up a document. "We need to secure any devices, documents, and keys related to the cabin transfer and associated accounts." "Associated accounts?" I asked, pulse steadying. "Plural?" He nodded. "We have activity linked to an account in the Cayman Islands under the name E.M. Carter with partial SSN. He read the last 4 digits, and my whole body went still. My social security number hung in the air like a framed theft. Charles lifted both hands, the universal pantomime for innocence. "This is theater. Evelyn has no offshore accounts." Ruiz's eyes were kind, not trusting. "Mrs. Carter, if you'll show us where you keep property records?" I led them to the dining table, to my neat stacks. It felt like surrendering my bones for inspection. Ruiz put on gloves, flipped through the 2002 deed, the insurance letter dated March 2023, the tax receipt stamped $2,184. "You kept it all," she murmured, almost approving. "I keep receipts," I said softly. "And I didn't sign any ratification." "Good," she said, glancing at me. "That keeps you clean." Charles moved to the doorway, arms crossed, the stance of a man who believes posture is proof. "This is harassment. We will sue." The Treasury agent approached him with a single page. "Mr. Carter, do you recognize this wire authorization?" he asked. "Dated Nov 28, 5:13 p.m., $60,000 from an escrow account into M. Carter ending 0031. And," he slipped out a second page, $240,000 into C. Carter Trust ending 7742. I watched something behind Charles's eyes change temperature. He flicked a look toward the hallway, toward his office, locked. Ruiz met my gaze. "May we look in the home office?" I handed her the bracelet. "Check the box," I said. "He likes to hide things inside the pretty." She opened it, empty except for foam. She smiled like a teacher finding a cheat sheet where she expected one. "We'll still need the office." I retrieved the spare key from the ceramic sugar jar, he never thinks I remember, and passed it to her. The door opened with a sulk. Inside, a shredder hummed, half a page peeking out like a tongue. Klein unplugged it. Ruiz pulled a banker's box from under the desk, Carter, consulting, invoices. On top, a folder labeled J. Reese, assignment option. Under it, a notepad indented with numbers. Ruiz slipped a paper over it, shaded with pencil until the ghosts came through. 184. Parcel, Oct 29, 4:42 p.m. Lydia, 6712. "The pattern's clear," Klein said, mostly to the room. Charles straightened. "You're reading into notes." I put my hand on the door jamb. Notes kept me alive for 32 years in classrooms that would eat a quiet woman. They also keep timelines honest. The Treasury agent checked his watch. "We'll need to freeze any assets in those accounts by Deck 24, 8:00 p.m. He said to Ruiz, then to me, "Unless you can establish non-involvement." I felt the calm that comes when a storm names itself. "What do you need from me?" I asked. "Truth," Ruiz said. "On paper." She slid a card across the desk. "Monday, 10 a.m. Bring copies, bring yourself." Charles scoffed. "Evie, don't encourage them." Ruiz turned to me once more. "One more question, Mrs. Carter. Who had access to your SSN?" I looked at Charles. at the initials on the assignment option, at the way the bracelet never held anything but his belief I could be dazzled. The answer was cold and exact. He used my social security number. By 9:07 a.m., a winter sun laid stripes across my kitchen floor. Charles had left. No note, just the smell of his cologne, as if charm could haunt wood. I brewed Earl Grey, stood very still, and listened for a house's advice. Houses know when to be quiet. A knock came soft as knuckles on a church pew. Through the glass, I recognized the hat before the face. Mr. Whitaker, the widower from 2 lots down on Mountain Ridge Road, the man who minds the gravel like it's family. He held a file folder fat with purpose. "Ms. Evelyn," he said, removing the hat like the old world taught him. "Didn't mean to surprise you. I drove down early. Saw some folks gabbing last week at the mailbox. Didn't like it." His eyes took in my robe, the unmade mourning. "May I?" I poured him tea without asking, the way mountain neighbors were trained before cell phones. He set the folder on the table like a confession. "Heard tell your place changed hands," he said, the words careful. "But I remember when you bought it. I brought over a snow shovel that December 2002. You made cocoa that could fix a man." I smiled at the memory, because remembering sweetness is its own protest. "What do you have, Mr. Whitaker?" He slid out a print, a photo of my cabin's porch taken on Oct 29, 4:18 p.m. from the angle of his trail camera. In the frame, Charles, shoulders hunched, and a younger man, sharp jaw, expensive coat, standing under my porch light. A woman held a notary bag. The timestamp stamped itself on the bottom right like a witness. "I set the camera after a bear took a liking to my trash," Whitaker said. "It catches motion. That day, it caught your husband. Twice." He laid down another photo. 4:43 p.m. The same trio shaking hands, the notary pressing a book to the rail to keep it flat. I recognized her profile. Lydia Bowers. The air felt thicker. Whitaker cleared his throat, pulled a folded paper from the folder. "Now, I ain't no lawyer, but the HOA, such as it is, still keeps a dusty binder for change of ownership notices. Your man left this with old Bert at the feed store to pass along to me the next morning. Bert forgot until yesterday. Thought it might matter to you." I unfolded the paper. A 1-page owner update form, dated Oct 30, listing buyer. C. Carter Trust and contact, Jonathan Reese, with a phone number and email. In sloppy hurry scratch, I saw Charles's lowercase t that always curled back like a fishhook. He hadn't even bothered to disguise the trust name. "And this," Whitaker said, tapping a second sheet. "Your porch light runs off a timer, the old kind. My boy rewired it in 2019. I got the work order. Shows you paid for it, not no C. Carter Trust. Thought if someone tries to say the house ain't yours? Well, wires, remember? It was such a mountain thing to say, it almost broke me. Wires, remember? I slipped everything into a tidy stack. Trail cam photos, HOA form, work order, N3, image and witness. The staircase of proof was building itself under me. "Ms. Evelyn," Whitaker added, eyes softening. "Forgive an old man, but I heard your husband out there say something as he left, after the papers were done." He consulted a note he'd written in pencil. He said, "Jonathan, if this goes sideways, she won't fight. She's tired. She loves holidays." He looked at me, small and sure. "He's wrong about some things." I nodded, a slow bow to the truth. "He's wrong about most." "My truck's in the drive if you need a ride to the sheriff or the FBI," he said, standing. "And I'll testify. My wife used to say I got a memory like a stubborn mule." He smiled. Stubborn's handy in winter. After he left, I scanned the photos into evidence. Whitaker, cam1.jpg and cam2.jpg, the HOA form as HOA, update, Carter Trust, PDF, the work order as electrical, timer, 2019 PDF. I added lines to my timeline. OCT 29, 418, 443. Trail cam captures Charles, Lydia, Jonathan at cabin. OCT 30. HOA form filed. Buyer listed as C. Carter Trust. Contact J. Reese. I printed a second set and slid it into the blue folder. My hands didn't tremble. He thought holidays would make me soft. But Advent is about waiting with intention. I looked at the photo of Jonathan under my porch light. the notary's mouth mid-syllable. Charles already turned away like a man who'd chosen the road he was on. Why was he buying my own property through a fake buyer? Saturday wore a gray wool sky. By 10:22 a.m., the kettle clicked off and my laptop blinked awake with the stubborn patience of an old mule. I opened my banking portal, Blue Ridge Community Credit Union, then the alerts tab I'd set up years ago after a substitute teacher stole petty cash from the supply drawer. At my age, paranoia is just experience wearing flats. Have you been through something similar? Tell us your story in the comments below. We read every comment. It's important for us to know we're not alone. There it sat, new external transfer, $60,000, 11/28/1713. Source, escrow, Henderson title 1189, destination nickname M. Carter. Owned 31. The memo line repeated like a chant. Cabin, parcel, 184, close. Another line, lower, as if it wanted to be overlooked. External transfer, $240,000, 11/28/1902 to C. Carter Trust, 7/742. I felt the numbers like cold coins in my palm. I clicked download confirmation. A tidy PDF bloomed, bank logo, trace ID 07714402, timestamps, and the last four of the receiving accounts. I printed 2 copies, evidence, ACH 6,000.PDF and ACH 24,000.PDF, and slid one set into my blue folder. I highlighted 1713 and 1902. The apology dinner started at 7:06 p.m. He'd toasted to freedom from debt while the second transfer trotted to his trust in an evening suit. My email pinged at 10:37. Henderson title, disbursement ledger. I opened it and read the clean cruelty of columns. Buyer's escrow, $300,000. Seller proceeds, E.M. Carter, 00, quit claim in escrow. Wire, Bur 1, $60,000 to Maya L. Carter Act, Yawson 31, TIN, 1127. Wire, number 2, $240,000 to C. Carter Trust, 742, EN, 9841. Fee, $1,200, Henderson title. Notary, Lydia Bowers, stamp 6712. I read it twice. They'd used my initials as a chalk outline, seller proceeds, 0.00, and wrote the rest of the story with wire codes. It was brutally elegant. I forwarded the ledger to Agent Ruiz with the subject, disbursement shows M is Maya, C TIN, 1127. I CC'd myself, then my blue tag flash drive got an update. I typed a fresh line into my timeline. Key events, Nov 28, 5:13 p.m. $60,000 wired to Maya L. Carter, TIN, 1127. Nov 28, 7:02 p.m. $240,000 wired to C. Carter Trust, IN, 9841. Nov 29, 12:47 p.m. Ratification requested, unsigned. Dickey 24, 8:00 p.m. Treasury freeze window. The landline rang at 11:02. I let Ryan talk into the void of my machine. Just checking on ratification. Buyer wants keys today at 3. We can sweeten with a small bonus, say $5,000 for your trouble. He sounded like a boy offering stickers for silence. I brewed tea, then dialed Blue Ridge and asked for fraud prevention. The woman on the line, Janelle, listened without interrupting. A professional kindness. We can flag outgoing wires connected to your SSN, Mrs. Carter, she said. But because the transfer's already posted, we'll need law enforcement to pull them back. You said FBI? Yes, Agent Ruiz. Then document everything. I'll note your profile. Potential identity misuse, SSN. You'll also want to add verbal passcode. Make it receipts, I said. She laughed softly and typed. At 11:31, my phone buzzed with a text from a number I didn't have saved. We good for keys, 3 p.m.? JR? I could see his jaw from the porch photo, sharp enough to open envelopes he didn't own. I screenshotted, forwarded to Ruiz, and did not reply. The house settled around me the way a jury does when it knows the ending, but wants to hear the last witness sing. I arranged the ACH confirmations beside the disbursement ledger and the trail cam photos. N1, timings. N2, documents. N3, images and neighbor testimony. The staircase was climbing towards something that didn't wobble. I picked up the ledger again. Seller proceeds, E.M. Carter, 000. In math, 0 is a number with a job, to hold place, to keep the rest honest. In theft, 0 is the grin. I circled wire number 2 until the ink bled through. But then, why was there a second transfer for $240,000? Sunday brought a thin sun and the sound of my neighbor scraping ice from his windshield. 7:40 a.m. I laid the blue folder open on the dining table like a quiet altar. ACH receipts, disbursement ledger, trail cam photos, HOA form, 2002 deed, insurance letter, tax receipt, DocuSign ratification, unsigned. I added the voice memo from the apology dinner to a subfolder, audio dinner, 110 KB M4A, and scrubbed through to 7:19 p.m., where Charles said, "Side agreements. You don't need to be troubled." I clipped the audio, exported it as clip, side agreements.mp3, and printed a transcript with timestamps. Proof has to be polite enough for a stranger to understand. At 8:12, I dialed Lydia Bowers. Her voicemail bubbled with apology about business hours and please text. I did, exactly as a teacher writes an assignment on the board. "Ms. Bowers, this is Evelyn Carter. I have a copy of a notarization bearing your stamp, 6/7/12, dated Oct. 29th, 4:42 p.m., for my cabin, parcel 184. I did not sign that document. I need to know who presented ID for me and under what circumstances. Reply in writing, please." At 8:29, a text arrived, the kind that tastes like someone wiping their fingerprints. "Mrs. Carter, Mr. Carter assured me you'd sign later. He said he had your POA on file. He presented your SSN and a driver's license copy. I realize now I should have required you present. I'm not proud of that appointment. LB," I exhaled and took the screen capture, Lydia, text, admission.png, then backed it up twice. N2, N3 hybrid, a notary admitting to a procedural breach and naming the SSN she saw. At 9:05, I called Agent Ruiz. "I have something," I said. "You always do," she answered. "Walk me through it." I read her Lydia's text. She went quiet the comfortable way, the way of someone fitting puzzle pieces. "That helps me get a statement on record," she said. "We'll knock on Maple Street today. And the $240,000. Likely an option fee or a kickback disguised as trust distributions," Ruiz said. "Either way, it ties your husband to a larger money movement. Our clock still reads Deck 24, 8 p.m. I want you ready before then." "I'm a teacher," I said. "I live by bells." "Good," she replied. "Then here's your homework. Make 3 identical blue folders. One stays with you. One for me Monday, 10 a.m. One sealed for Christmas Eve. Public setting, just in case folks get slippery." Public setting. I thought of table leaves and good china. By 10:12, I was at Staples on Tunnel Road buying a pack of Avery blue dividers, 2 external drives, and a pocket recorder. Cash, $87.64, receipts stapled inside the main folder. An old habit, pay for tools that outlast panic. At home, I printed cover sheets with neat headings and a table of contents. 1. Timeline, Oct. 29, Deck 24. 2. Ownership, 2002 deed, insurance, tax. 3. Sale documents, ledger, ratification, notary stamp. 4. Financial movements, $60,000 to Maya, $240,000 to Carter Trust. 5. Images and audio, trail cam, dinner clip. 6. Third-party statements, Whitaker note, Lydia text. I labeled the sealed Christmas Eve folder, Open After Grace. The words steadied me. Some men underestimate a woman packing an envelope. At 1:03 p.m., and the church group chat pinged with the December 22nd charity dinner menu. My name was gone from the footer where coordinator used to live. I typed, "Looks lovely," and did not send it. Reputations bruise 2 weeks before they break. The afternoon slid by in the productive hush that follows a plan. I set a calendar alert for Monday, 9:40 a.m. Leave for FBI and another for Deck 24, 6:30 p.m. Set table. Folder by place setting. I booked a private dining room at the Beulah House for Deck 24, 8 p.m. Family only, I wrote in notes. The hostess, Renee, recognized my voice. "Christmas Eve?" she said. "We'll have candles." "Good," I said. "We'll need light." As dusk gathered, I lined the 3 blue folders shoulder to shoulder like choir altos who know their note. The house dimmed to that pre-December blue where secrets think they belong. My phone buzzed. Unknown. Delete everything. Let it go. Or Christmas won't be kind to you. No signature. I screenshotted it, filed it under threats. Fear tried the lock. Paper held the door. At 7:18 p.m., Ruiz texted a single line that clicked like a safety off. I waited until the house exhaled. Sunday, 9:46 p.m. The hall lamp threw an oval of light on our bedroom door. Domestic theater, 3rd act. I carried the blue folder like a hymnal and shut the door behind me. Charles sat on the edge of the bed, tying his shoelace like a man ready to leave before the sermon turned on him. Going somewhere? I asked. Late showing, he said, not meeting my eyes. Buyers in town for the holidays. Buyers love Christmas, I said. Thieves love it more. I set the folder on the dresser, opened it so the tabs were a fan of dates. Sit. He smiled, slow and patient, the way men smile at women they believe history will not believe. Evie, you're exhausted. I'm organizing. I laid out 3 pages. Exhibit A, I said, teacher voice. ACH 24,000.pdf, no V28, 7:02 p.m., wire to C. Carter Trust. That's you. During Thanksgiving dinner prep, while you were blessing mashed potatoes, the money blessed itself. He shrugged. Business. Exhibit B, I continued. Henderson Title Disbursement Ledger. Seller proceeds to E. M. Carter, 0.0. Wire to Maya L. Carter, $60,000. She called it reinvestment. I call it recompense for coaching. He flinched at Maya's name, then blinked it away. Stop being dramatic. Exhibit C, I said, sliding the phone between us. A text from Lydia Bowers, 8:29 a.m. today. Mr. Carter assured me you had given him POA and showed your SSN and a driver's license copy. You showed my numbers like confetti, Charles. His jaw tightened. I had a power of attorney. No, I said, calm as iron. You had this. I held up a single sheet I'd pulled from the back of his office cabinet an hour earlier, tucked behind a 2017 tax file that smelled of dust and shortcuts. General power of attorney, Evelyn M. Carter. The notary block was blank. The signature was mine only in ambition. The date line read Oct 28 in a hand that forgot how my 8 leans. I put it beside a scan of my actual signature, the one on my 2018 retirement certificate. You forged the instrument you waved at Lydia. He reached for the paper. I pulled it back and slipped it into a plastic sleeve. Don't touch evidence, I said. Oil smears. Judges dislike smears. Where did you get that? He asked, voice lower. Your office, behind Schedule C, under arrogance. He stood, hands on his hips. You never understood the scale of what I'm doing. I understand math and vowels, I said, tapping the POA. This is a felony spelled in your handwriting. His eyes flicked to the dresser mirror where our reflections sat like strangers who used to share a table. You would destroy your family over a cabin. I would save my name over your scheme. He stepped closer, heat under deodorant. Listen to me. You will ratify the sale. You will tell Agent Ruiz you consented. And by December 24th, 8 p.m., Treasury will look elsewhere. We will go to Hilton Head for New Year's and pretend to like each other again. At my age, I said, I don't pretend. I document. He laughed, a dry bark. You think you'll win in public? You? With your church friends and your casseroles? I'll turn them. I'll hold your reputation in my pocket and squeeze until it stops wriggling. I slid the pocket recorder from my robe pocket and placed it on the nightstand. Rec 0047-19 glowed like a small truth. Explain that to the microphone, I said. Slowly. He stared at the red dot, then at me, a muscle jumping in his cheek the way fear checks if it's awake. You'll regret making this public, he said finally, each word measured, like a man laying nails in a line. If I take this into the dining room on Christmas Eve, will he stop before the hammer hits? Christmas Eve, 7:52 p.m. The Beulah house smelled like nutmeg and like decisions you can't take back. Renee had draped the private room in white linen and candlesticks that carried small, steady fires. I set the sealed blue folder at the head of the table with a tag. Open after grace. The clock in my head ticked toward 8:00 p.m., Treasury's freeze window and our family's favorite hour to lie. Maya arrived first in a red dress that understood spotlights. She kissed my cheek, eyeing the folder as if it were a gift she hadn't earned. Festive, she said. Dad's parking. Jonathan Reese followed, coat expensive enough to ignore weather. He extended a hand, confident, calculating. His cufflinks were tiny compasses, ironic in a man who steals maps. Mrs. Carter. Big fan of what you've built up there. It was built by smaller hands, I said. They write dates. Charles swept in at 7:58, cologne announcing him before his mouth did. He smiled like the prodigal who believed the fatted calf would never recognize the knife. Evie, he said, and pulled out my chair. Let's keep this sweet. We will keep it accurate, I replied, smoothing the napkin across my lap. The room acknowledged the moment by quieting. I bowed my head. Grace, I said simply, for food and for paper that tells the truth. When I finished, I slid the blue folder across to Charles. Open it. He glanced at Maya. She glanced at Jonathan. The compass on his wrist twitched north. Charles lifted the flap. Tab 1, timeline. Tab 2, ownership. He skimmed with performative boredom. So orderly, he sneered. Tab 3, I prompted. He flipped. The disbursement ledger stared back, neat black numbers that refused to be charmed. Maya's name bloomed beside $60,000. C. Carter Trust drank $240,000 like brandy. Jonathan's jaw tightened. Tab 4, I said. He turned to ACH receipts with trace IDs that know how to testify. Tab 5, I continued. He found trail cam photos, 4:18 and 4:43 p.m., Okie 29, his own posture admitting more than he ever would. He laughed, brittle. Neighbors and their toys. Tab 6, I said, and set my pocket recorder in the center like bread. Clip. Side agreements.mp3 chirped to life. The room filled with Charles's voice. Side agreements. You don't need to be troubled. Diners at the next table went quiet, the way strangers hush when they recognize a wreck mid-bend. Jonathan leaned in, voice low. You said she'd sign. She will, Charles said, not to me. Maya's smile cracked. Dad, she whispered, turn it off. I kept my hands folded. Tab 7, I said, and slid a printed screenshot to the top. Lydia, text, admission, PNG. Charles read the line where Lydia wrote POA, SSN, license copy. The candlelight showed the pallor arrive on his cheeks like an uninvited guest. He looked up at me. You think this scares me? No, I said. I think this does. I uncapped a pen and wrote on the place card beside his plate. Renee's calligraphy looked better with numbers. 8:00 p.m. Treasury freeze window. I turned the card so it faced him, then placed my phone on the table, speaker on. The line already open. Agent Ruiz, I said, voice even. We're at Beulah House. Present are Charles Carter, Maya Carter, and Jonathan Reese. The folder is open. Ruiz's voice came through clear as a plumb line. Happy Christmas Eve, Mrs. Carter, Mr. Reese. Consider yourselves on notice. At 8:00 p.m., Treasury action executes. We suggest dessert before handcuffs. Maya scraped her chair back. Jonathan reached for his phone. Charles's hand went to mine on instinct, then froze when it found no forgiveness to hold. I lifted my glass, water catching flame. To truth, I said, and met my own eyes in the reflection of the window. A woman who had learned to breathe slower than other people's panic. Renee dimmed the lights for ambiance. The door to our room eased open on its hinges. Leather soles paused just inside the threshold. Who stepped through first? The hostess with creme brulee or the agents with a warrant? The door swung wider and the room folded around three silhouettes, Agent Ruiz, Agent Klein, and a uniformed deputy whose radio murmured like a sleeping animal. Renee hovered behind them with a tray of creme brulee torn between sugar and subpoenas. The wall clock over the sideboard clicked into 8:00 p.m. like a gavel finding wood. Good evening, Ruiz said, voice even. Treasury freeze is now active. Mr. Carter, Mr. Reese, please place your phones face down. Jonathan's jaw flexed. He didn't. He stood instead, scooting his chair just enough to seem accidental. "This is harassment," he started, and then he moved, a quick diagonal toward the corridor, the practiced glide of a man who thinks doors open for him. Klein was faster. A hand on Jonathan's shoulder, a reminder that gravity has paperwork. "Sit down, sir." The deputy stepped into the doorway, widening it with authority. Charles's hand twitched toward my blue folder, as if stealing back the past could fix the present. I laid my palm on the folder and didn't blink. "Don't," I said. "At my age, tone is a tool." Ruiz set a sealed evidence bag on the linen. "We're taking originals or certified copies of items in tabs 3 through 6. You'll receive receipts." She glanced at me. "Mrs. Carter?" I slid the stack forward. The flame from the candles licked the plastic like a blessing. Ruiz's gloved hands moved with patient choreography. Disbursement ledger, ACH confirmations, trail cam photos, Lydia's text, audio clip transcript. Each page made a soft sound, like a decision being filed. Maya stared at the ledger as if numbers could be wished into better manners. "Dad, say something," she hissed, nails worrying a napkin into threads. "Tell them I only—" "Ms. Carter," Ruiz said gently, "anything you say is going to be heard," I finished, and folded my napkin neatly. Clean words travel better. Jonathan tried again, slower this time, calculating the angles of bodies and candlelight. Klein nudged his chair in with a knee. "Last warning," he said. The deputy shifted just enough for his badge to find the room's attention. Charles leaned back, adopting his old closing pose, left ankle on right knee, fingertips templed, the look of a man who sells promises on commission. "Agent," he said, "I have counsel. This family dinner, on Christmas Eve, is hardly the venue for theatrics." Ruiz nodded toward my place card, still facing him. 8:01 p.m., Treasury Freeze window. "We rarely get to choose venue," she said. "But the clock did, and the funds did." Maya's face went pale, a winter leaf deciding it could not pretend to be spring. She looked at me, then at the recorder resting between the water and the bread. "I can explain," she started. "I only moved the $60,000 because Dad said it was a reimbursement." "For what?" I asked, not unkind. Her mouth opened, closed. A small sound escaped, something between a sob and a strategy dying. Renee finally set down the creme brulee with the reverence of someone diffusing a bomb. The sugar caps shone like question marks. Jonathan's phone buzzed once on the table, face down. He flinched. Klein lifted it and slid it into an evidence pouch. "You'll sign the inventory," he said. Charles tried charm again. "Evie, tell them you gave consent," he said softly, the way you might ask for salt. "Tell them you knew. For us." I met his eyes. Love is a ledger. Some debits never reconcile. "I did not," I said, "and I will not." Ruiz took a breath that sounded like weather changing. "Charles Carter, you are detained pending questioning for suspected wire fraud, identity misuse, and conspiracy. Jonathan Reese, same." She looked to Maya. "Ms. Carter, we'd like you to come in voluntarily. Right now would be wise." The deputy stepped forward. Jonathan tensed, then dropped his shoulders the way a man does when the math is finished. Charles stood slowly, hands visible, the theater of innocence reduced to stage directions. As the cuffs whispered shut, Maya leaned toward me, breath like peppermint and panic. Her whisper threaded the candlelight, thin and frantic. It was her idea. They took Charles and Jonathan into the hall first, the door sighing shut behind badge and leather. Renee refilled my water and touched my shoulder like a prayer you don't have to earn. 8:31 p.m., Christmas Eve. The room kept breathing. Maya sat across from me, red dress dimmed to a warning light. Agent Ruiz slid back into the chair to my left, a legal pad unfurling like a runway. "Ms. Carter," she said to Maya, calm as a librarian, "walk us through your part. Names, dates, amounts." Maya's gaze snagged on the blue folder's spine. "Dad said you never used the cabin in winter," she began. "He said a quitclaim was a formality and that the buyer would front $300,000 for a flip. He'd cover his old debts, I'd get $60,000 for consulting." She swallowed. He said I deserved it for years of taking his calls. Did you know about the $240,000? Ruiz asked. Maya's face moved through 3 answers before landing on the true one. No, she whispered. Not until tonight. Ruiz nodded, made a single note. You texted Mrs. Carter about a Cayman issue on Nov 29, 2:17 p.m. Why? Dad panicked after the FBI came, Maya said. He told me to keep Evelyn calm, to get her to sign ratification. He said if she didn't, Treasury would freeze everything and we'd all drown together. Her laugh cracked. He didn't mention life jackets with his name on them. Klein returned, set a slim evidence pouch on the table, a USB drive in a brass casing. Office search at Reese's firm, he said to Ruiz. Prelim label, option, assign, Carter, encrypted. Tech is on it. Good, Ruiz said. Then to Maya, you can help yourself here. False POA is a line you don't want to stand on. Tell me about Lydia. I never met her, Maya replied quickly. Dad handled the notary. He said he had an old power of attorney from when Evelyn had surgery. She glanced at me, realizing as she said it that I'd never had surgery beyond a 2014 outpatient cataract. She exhaled. That was a lie, too. At my age, I said, temper level, I don't get loud, I get exact. Ruiz folded her hands. Miss Carter, if you provide a written statement tonight and return the $60,000 within 72 hours, the U.S. attorney may consider cooperation credit. If you don't, this becomes heavier than a red dress can carry. Maya nodded. A small bob like a swimmer finding bottom. I'll return it, she said. I'm sorry. Apologies travel after money, I said. Send it first. Klein's radio murmured. He stepped aside, then back. Reese just admitted to structuring and named a silent investor trying to move $240,000 before tonight's freeze. Name? Ruiz asked. Klein glanced at his notes. C. Carter Trust as front. Secondary is a shell with invoice trails to Carter Consulting. Addresses match Mr. Carter's office. He thought hiding it in a trust made it immortal. A pause. Public defenders on his way. Ruiz turned to me, the severity softening. Mrs. Carter will file to void the transfer on grounds of forgery and identity misuse. A judge can issue a temporary restraining order on any new encumbrances. Expect an early hearing by Deck 27. She met my eyes. We'll also request restitution and a stay of seizure on your personal accounts pending verification. Your blue folder is what we call probative. Paper speaks, I said. You just have to hold the room quiet enough to hear it. Maya dabbed her eyes, smearing cherry into bruised pink. Evelyn, she began. Return the $60,000, I repeated. Then call your mother. Tell her the truth before the internet does. Ruiz stood. We'll escort you to sign. She paused. One last thing. Keys. If you have the cabin keys, Mrs. Carter, we'll log them, photograph, and return. Chain of custody matters. I reached into my purse and laid 3 keys on the linen. Front door brass, deadbolt nickel, shed padlock iron. Wires, remember, I said. So do keys. Ruiz smiled despite herself and bagged them one by one. We left Beulah House in a procession of ordinary. Coats, thanks to Renee, a whisper about the creme brulee. Outside, the air held its breath over Lexington Avenue. Christmas lights pretended everything glowed. By 10:12 p.m., I was home. The house greeted me with the small courage of familiar furniture. I placed the blue folder on the mantel, beside the 2002 Polaroid of the cabin's first fire. The phone buzzed. A bank alert. Incoming wire, $60,000 pending. Maya L. Carter. Reversal initiated. Another. Freeze applied to C. Carter Trust. Treasury action. I exhaled the kind of breath you don't realize you've been renting. I turned off the hall light, and the house settled like a verdict finding its words. Sleep found me where it could. Morning would bring paperwork, and then a judge, and then the slow stitching that looks like peace from far away. Still, one envelope was missing. January 3rd, 9:18 a.m. Asheville held the kind of cold that makes your breath a visible opinion. The judge had signed the void transfer order on Deck 27, ink crisp as a December apple. The county recorder restored title to Evelyn M. Carter on Deck 30, parcel 184, sliding back into my hands like a loyal dog. Maya's $60,000 came home and left again, to pay for notary penalties, a donation to the literacy fund at the church, and a winter coat drive in Henderson County. Charles was arraigned on Jan 2 for wire fraud, forgery, and identity misuse. Jonathan Reese pled to structuring and conspiracy. Lydia surrendered her commission. Some endings are tidy because paper is. I parked at the bottom of Mountain Ridge Road and walked the last quarter mile, boots crunching old snow into honest sound. The hemlocks wore sugar on their shoulders. At the porch, I paused where the trail cam photo had immortalized a lie and let the cold burn my lungs clean. Inside, the cabin remembered me the way a favorite book does, opening to the right page without a fight. I set a grocery bag on the counter. Coffee, matches, 2 cinnamon sticks, a bottle of Murphy's oil soap because wood likes being listened to. I stacked kindling with the steadiness of a woman who sharpened pencils for a living. Crisscross, breath, spark. The fire took its time, then decided to live. On the table, the one rescued from a thrift store in 2008 for $40, lay a small stack of mail forwarded by the post office, topped by an envelope with my mother's handwriting, the round, patient script of Eleanor James. The postmark, Deck 20, 2002. I'd never seen it. It must have been tucked into a box that got tucked into another life. No return address. The flap opened with the sound of a memory choosing you. Inside, a single sheet and a photocopy of her will. She'd underlined a paragraph I knew by heart, but had never read with today's eyes. To my daughter, I leave the cabin outright with the instruction, do not sell it for love, fear, or convenience. It is not the house that holds you. It is your refusal to be sold. Beneath, in her hand, a note, don't sell peace for love. I sat down like a prayer does, slow, knees careful. Outside, a raven made the sound that always makes me think of old doors. I took the 2002 Polaroid from my coat pocket, first fire, Deck 7, 2002, 6:22 p.m., and set it beside the will. Then I opened my blue folder and slid a new tab at the back. 7. Legacy. Inside it, I placed Mama's note, a copy of the void order, and a photo I took with my phone just then, flame agreeing with wood. My phone buzzed with a text from Pastor Irene. The board wants you back to coordinate John 20 book drive, if you're willing. I am, I replied. Bring a box labeled receipts. We'll fill it with novels. I walked the perimeter of the cabin, fingers trailing along cedar like a teacher taking attendance. The window above the sink reflected a woman I recognized again. 62, spine straighter than December, hands inked with dates that no one could borrow. At my age, I don't shout, I document. But today, alone with the fire and the note that crossed a 20-year bridge to find me, I allowed myself one sound, brief and private, a laugh that forgave the floorboards for all they'd heard. I hung my coat on the hook, set a pot on the stove, and watched the first stripe of steam rise like a signature that belongs only to me. Then I wrote one last line on the inside cover of the blue folder, under legacy. In the steady handwriting I taught to 1,000 children. Evelyn kept the cabin. She wrote, "Don't sell peace for love." Now I understand, both were never for sale. If this story gave you strength, help us by sharing, liking, and hitting the notification bell. We'd love to hear in the comments which part of the story you liked most. See you tomorrow.